Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2022-2023 Spotlight on Sports series. Through this series, we will highlight innovations in business and organizational leadership through the lens of sports. Our recent speakers have included Jackie Joyner-Kersee, three-time Olympic gold medalist and international humanitarian, Daniel Orlando Diaz, Director of World Cup, Olympic, and Cross-Platform Partnerships at NBC Universal Media, and 2011 Carthage grad. Donald Driver, 14-year wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, humanitarian and trainer to future athletes. And of course, Craig Leopold, owner of the Minnesota Wild and parent to 2018 Carthage graduate Bradford Leopold. These leaders and innovators in their fields have come to Carthage to spark substantive conversations about the sports industry and the many business enterprises that are connected to the celebration, production, and promotion of sports. Carthage is a center of gravity for these discussions, in part due to our new Masters of Science in Business and Sport Management offerings, which is a winning approach to business education, focusing on disruptive innovation and designing and developing high-impact teams. This program prepares students for leadership in today's workplace, both within the sports industry and far beyond. I congratulate also all the undergrads who are here today to take advantage of this opportunity to learn from a star in the sport management field. This is an important part of the Carthage experience. I encourage all of you who have a passion for sports and who want to study business through the lens of sports to apply for our Masters in Sport Management program. It is also my great pleasure to introduce senior Hannah Snedeker, who as a sophomore took advantage of a J-term class that is occasionally offered for undergrads. Before we proceed to Hannah, I would also like to acknowledge Craig Leopold and Helen P. Johnson Leopold for their generosity. It's made it possible for the Masters in Sport Management program to be here, as well as the Sam and Jean Johnson Distinguished Visitors Fund, which also contributed to today's program. Without further ado, Hannah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Snedeker, and I want to thank you all for coming to the Spotlight on Sports event today. I am a senior studying management and economics here at Carthage and have begun to pursue career opportunities in the sports industry. As I am now in my fourth year here at Carthage, I have received numerous opportunities to expand my knowledge and experience in the sports industry, much of which originated during my Introduction to Sports Management J-term in 2020. This course was designed to introduce Carthage students to the business side of sports by learning firsthand from industry professionals in both corporate and game day settings. Thanks to support from Craig Leopold, we were able to make a 5-day trip to visit the Minnesota Wild hockey team, where we shadowed various departments from customer experience and stadium operations to ticketing. After the COVID-19 pandemic began, our classmates founded the Front Office, a student-led sports management organization, to continue the experiences our class had received. We were inspired to keep the momentum and continue learning about the sports industry through networking opportunities. We have since then met with over 20 individuals in major league, minor league, and college sports, and have many more opportunities coming through the pipeline. While meeting with amazing individuals, I have had the chance to intern for 2 summer baseball teams, each with a championship run and 1 championship title. As an intern, I was in charge of entertainment and promotion side of games while conducting business with corporate sponsors and working hard to ensure that they re-sign their contracts for years to come. My educational experiences here at Carthage have provided me with extensive knowledge needed to be successful in off-campus internships, and I especially want to thank the SMEDS Internship Fund and other generous donors to acknowledge the support provided by the Aspire Center for making all this possible. And now I introduce Carter Rockhill, the professor for the Sports Management program.
Yes, thank you, President Hannah, the phenomenal leader of our front office. That was great. Thank you very much. Molly Fletcher is a trailblazer in every sense of the word. Hailed as the female Jerry Maguire, she made a name for herself as one of the first female sports agents and represented hundreds of sports' biggest stars. Recognized as the world's top 50 keynote speaker, Molly shares the unconventional techniques she used to thrive in her former career as a top sports agent, and now is a successful entrepreneur, thought leader, podcaster, author, a little bit of everything. She is the author of 5 books, including her latest book, The Energy Clock, and host of the popular Game Changers with Molly Fletcher podcast, where she interviews experts and celebrities in every field. Molly's TED Talk, Secrets of a Champion Mindset, has racked up more than 1 million views, and she recently launched her first on-demand course, Up Your Game. Her company, Game Changer Performance Group, helps clients unlock peak performance through training experiences on energy, negotiation, and high impact. Molly's passion is to give people the tools to unlock your drive and to up your game. A true game changer, it is my pleasure to welcome Molly Fletcher.
Thank you, Carter. Carter and I have been hanging out all day. We've been having fun, haven't we?
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. Thank you. Despite the differences we have, Michigan State and Ohio State, but no big deal.
That's right. Go green.
Go Buckeyes. All right. How are you doing, though, today, Molly?
I'm doing great. I had a wonderful morning with young people in the sports management program, which was fantastic. They asked great questions and peppered me all morning and loved every minute of it. Hopefully left them with some nuggets that they can lift up and apply in their lives. So far, so good. Let's do this.
Yeah, you left me with some nuggets. I was pretty
Good.
inspired myself from that, so I know you left them with some
Good
stuff. So we have about 50 minutes here. We're going to talk about a few different topics, starting to get to know you, talking about your career as a successful trailblazing sports agent, sort of the transition to what you're doing now. And then in the spirit of your podcast, I'm going to hit you with some quick questions at the end, a little bit of rapid fire. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Of course you're ready. You host a podcast, so the question is if I'm ready, which I am. So let's go.
Let's do it.
All right. So something that you discuss frequently is the notion of drive, right? So constantly being motivated and never stopping with your most recent accomplishment, always pushing yourself forward to do the next best thing. So my question for you is, what were you like as a kid, and where did this drive originate from?
Well, I do talk about that. I gave a TED Talk on drive, and the reason was, as a sports agent for almost 20 years, what I saw was the difference between the ones who made it and stayed there and the ones who didn't. The ones who got to the big leagues for a cup of coffee and the ones that stayed there for 10 years. You know, the guys and gals out on tour that are making putts and winning tournaments and the ones that weren't. And it was a mindset difference. They recognized that it wasn't just about their talent, but rather about their drive. And, to me, drive is something that is inside of all of us. To answer your question, I think that, I grew up in a home with 2 wonderful parents who thankfully are 80 and 85, and I talk to them twice a day still, and older brothers who treated me a lot more like a little brother than a little sister. But I think that, I grew up in a home where you found a way, and there was always a way. And even though I, would go play doubles with my family, they'd throw me in as the ball girl because there was an even 4, and I was the ball girl, and I looked at them when we were leaving, and I said, I'll never forget it. I said, one of these days I'm going to beat every single one of you in tennis. And my mom looked at me and goes, well, that'd be great. That'd be great. And sure enough, about a year later, that happened, and it's been a fun journey. But my drive came from my environment at some level, but I believe drive is something that's in all of us. I mean, it's about mindset and curiosity and discipline and confidence. And I think we go through life on a journey and unlock these different levers, if you will, that help us unlock our drive and help us pursue what matters most to us. I think we've got to make sure our ladder's leaning up against the right wall. We're chasing the right stuff. As a sports agent for 20 years, I mean, you work 24/7, so you got to love it. And for me, it was always recognizing why I did what I did, and I think knowing why we do what we do and what we're chasing, particularly for the young people in the room, you got to want it bad enough to keep grinding when it gets hard, because it'll get hard. but you got to want it enough to keep going.
Yeah, and we were just talking with the students about that, kind of the finding your why, finding that purpose. So for you, what was that process like, and how would you, I guess, declare what your why is?
Well, for me, my purpose now is to lead, inspire, and connect with courage and optimism, which I spent some time trying to get clear on. I always think it's interesting that companies have mission statements and purpose statements and core values, and they're on the wall, and they're on their website, and they're everywhere. And yet people don't as much. And I think it's incredibly important for us to, because just like an organization, it becomes a bit of a guiding light for us as business owners, as individuals. It can be equally as powerful. So for me, it was about gaining clarity on what was the driver and what was the why. And then you vet all your decisions at some level through that why, if you will, and it allows you to know what to say yes to, what to say no to, what to keep going after, and what to pull back on. I think when we know why we do what we do, it changes what we do. I often say that if I laid a plank over top of this building and the next one, and let's say the plank was 1.5 inches thick and 1.5 feet wide, and let's say it dips a little bit in the middle, and it's about it's a good little walk across. So I always ask this question: how many people would walk across that plank to the other side for $1 million? Now here's a little data point for you: 80% of the people make it across the plank, but 20% don't. It's a pretty day. It's not real windy, right? I mean, you guys probably got it. There's no net underneath the plank. So how many people would walk across that plank to the other side for $1 million? Raise your hand. Okay, how many people would walk across for $5 million? Right. How many people would walk across if the most important people in your life were on the other side? Right. So when we know why we do what we do, it drives us. It changes how we behave in a huge way.
That's awesome. Thank you. So kind of like thinking about this story again, your development, where you've gotten to where you're at now, who would you say was the most influential figure in guiding you to where you're at now?
I would say personally, it was definitely my parents. My husband and I have been married for 22 years, and we have three daughters who are just fantastic. And so from a personal perspective, values, all those things, it was definitely my mom and dad. Professionally, I would say a lot of people. I mean, I feel so grateful. I think, for all of us, I mean, mentors are everywhere. People that we can learn from are everywhere. I mean, whether it's people I interview on my podcast or somebody I'm checking out with at the grocery store one day, right? We can learn from so many people. And so, but professionally, it was certainly the agency that I worked for. I worked for the Super Bowl host committee, Lehman Bennett. You might remember he was the head coach of the Falcons. He was a great mentor to me along the way. The agency that I worked with and for, our leader there was a great mentor. And my clients, I mean, I learned as much as I was representing, Smoltz and Doc Rivers and these, I learn a lot from them too, in the way they behave and prepare, the way they navigate change and challenges. And so, when you're beside peak performers all day, every day, for almost 2 decades, you at some level, you can't help but consume that mindset, that way of behaving. And so I feel really blessed to have been able to sort of soak that in as a little bit of a sidebar sponge to the work that I did as an agent. And so they in weird ways were mentors for me too. Lots of people. I think we can all find them if we look hard enough and lean into them. I always say, when you ask for advice, you get a job. When you ask for a job, you get advice. By the way, I think I forgot to mention that to the young guys in the room this morning. But, and so I always tried to ask for advice and learn a lot. And I think when you do that, you can find great mentors, great, people that can help you along the way.
Well, Molly, that's the perfect transition, this notion of asking for advice, leading to the job, and you getting your start in your career because you've negotiated over $500 million in contracts. But to me, one of the most impressive negotiations you made was your first, where you were able to negotiate free rent at your apartment complex. So tell us a little bit about that story and how that sort of launched your career.
Sure. So, it was a fun one. So when I graduated, I played tennis at Michigan State, and after I graduated, I said to my parents that I wanted to move to Atlanta and get in the sports business. And they thought, well, this will be interesting. How are you going to pay for your little excursion to Atlanta? Because we're not. We're not paying for that. And so I taught tennis all summer in town, saved $2,000, got in my car, drove down to Atlanta, was going to stay on a friend's couch who was already down there doing an internship. And she said, you can stay with me until you kind of figure it out. My college coach gave me the names of 3 people in Atlanta who were tennis pros. And she said, look, call these people up and maybe they'll give you some advice. And in that spirit, right, of asking for advice. So I get down to Atlanta. I've got, I don't know, now I've got about $1,600. You know, I've been walking through the grocery store in every city eating grapes because they're free if you eat them when you're there, just so you know. And you won't drop dead if you eat grapes at the grocery store. I'm just proof of that. So the first morning I called this first tennis pro, this guy on my list, and really nice guy. And as we're talking, he said, you know, Molly, I don't know if you know this, but in Atlanta, like tennis is a big deal. Like, people teach tennis at apartment complexes for a little bit off their rent. And I was like, dude, I've been eating grapes for 4 days. I woke up on a couch. I don't have a job. I got $1,600. I'm like, talk to me. And he said, you know what? Actually, a really good buddy of mine just got engaged where he teaches tennis at this property. They're going to need a pro, but I don't think that the manager of the property knows she's about to lose her pro. I said, oh, my God, well, where is this place? So he tells me where it is. I drive over there. Long story short, I go in, and she didn't know she was about to lose her pro. I introduced myself to her and talked to her. When I left, though, I noticed across the street there was this pizza place, a local pizza place called Pero's Pizza. So I walked into Pero's and said, look, what if you give me 15 pizzas for free once a month? I'll give them to people that come to the tennis clinic at the apartment complex. If you give me coupons from Pero's, I'll put the coupon in the newsletter that they deliver to the apartments every day. And he goes, I love it. I'll do that. 15 pizzas for free, and you'll stuff the coupon in the newsletter? I go, yeah. He goes, deal. I was like, sweet. But Mr. Perro, like, and I'm thinking, I don't have a deal right yet, you know, over there. So I said, Mr. I'll be back. I got you. So then I get back in my car. I drive back. I call my buddy at Wilson Sporting Goods who gave me all my gear in college. I got him to send, it was very nice of him to send a box of Wilson stuff down to me. He sends that down. I wake up the next morning, I print these tennis tips I'd written for a little magazine in Lansing. So I had about 50 of those tips. 1:15 my box comes in. I go back over to the property. I've got my tennis tips, my Wilson stuff. Walked in and started talking to the manager. And when I walked in with my box and my tennis tips, I can still see it. She looked at me and goes, oh my gosh. She said, you're not going to believe this. And I was like, what's up? She goes, the pro came in this morning. He's getting married and moving out. Like, we need a pro. And I was like, no. This is kind of incredible timing, you know? So long story short, I go, well, I was dropping off this box of Wilson stuff and these tennis tips. And she goes, man, this is really cool. And I said, well, how did it work, to your question? She said, well, the rent's $850. We gave the pro $500 off the rent every month, and he wrote us a check for the difference of $350. And I said, got it. I said, listen, there's this place right across the street. These guys are cool. And I walk her through the whole pizza thing. And she goes, wow, this is great. And I go, yeah. I go, but here's the thing, like this whole like, you know, $850, $500, write a check for the difference. She goes, yeah. I go, let's just waive it. She goes, what? I go, let's waive it. I'll move in. We can keep the momentum. And she goes, well, I got to go call my boss, right? And see if we can. Long story short, she comes back. She was like, yeah, you're good to go. So I lived in this apartment complex, to answer your question, Carter, for free for 9 years and taught tennis every Tuesday night to anybody at the property that wanted to come to the clinics, which gave me a lot more bandwidth because, you know, it gave me an opportunity. I worked for the Super Bowl host committee initially, which I made $600 a month. I called Lehman Bennett back. I go, do you mean a week or a day? He goes, no, I mean $600 a month. So it gave me a little bit more bandwidth when I had removed such a large expense, which was huge. So yeah, no, I mean, I believe you got to negotiate all the time and practice in fun moments, little moments, big moments, and it makes you better at it.
Free rent now is unthinkable, so that's impressive. But no, you know, and as we alluded to, that really was what sort of proved, you know, really started, I should say, your negotiating prowess and your skills there. Obviously, you go on to negotiate over $500 million in contracts throughout your career, which earned you you were dubbed the female Jerry Maguire. So I want to ask you honestly, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, you know, I get that question quite a bit. You know, to me, I don't overthink it. I think, it's an easy way for people to go, oh my gosh, I get it, right? Like, I get it. But I'll tell you what'll make you feel old, right, is when you look at these guys at the back of the room are like, what movie is she talking about? What's Jerry Maguire and what is that movie? That's when I felt old, was when a couple young people asked me that once. It's an easy way for people to know what I did. We had 300 clients, he had one, so you can imagine how stressed out I was if he was that stressed out with one.
Absolutely. No, that's great. But also, I think what's interesting, too, is when you began your career, you also did something that was really revolutionary for being an agent, being representation, and that you decided, hey, let's go out, and to your point, kind of the one client versus all the clients you represented, you went out to get those clients.
Sure.
So how did that practice, how did it start, and how did it really revolutionize how we even see sports agents operate now?
Yeah, you mean how did my process of becoming an agent start? Is that? Well, I was with a small agency initially, and we had a few clients, and then I saw an opportunity to go out and get more base. We had one baseball player, and I thought, let's go get more guys. Like, there's more. There's Georgia Tech, Georgia, the Braves, minor league systems, et cetera. And so I put a business plan together to demonstrate to the leader of the organization. I said, let's go do this. And I put a plan together, and he said, go for it. So I would go down to Georgia Tech initially and lean on the fence with scouts and players, with scouts up and down in khakis and golf shirts, right, with chewing tobacco and bubble gum. And so I packed a chew, and no, I'm just kidding. But, I built a great relationship with Georgia Tech and some of those guys, and I signed a couple guys that year and a couple more the next year, and continued to sort of recruit those young guys. And then they'd percolate through the minor league systems. 50% of first-round guys make it, less as you go down. And then just continue to go see those guys in the minor leagues, build relationships with them, and pour into them, really, in hopes that, number one, I would over-deliver for them in a way that would allow them to want to help me get more players. And they often did. And then I got to some critical mass there, and then one of my baseball players that I represented got released. Baseball player from the Rockies, partied too much, and he didn't make it. He was a second rounder. And so he came in to help me grow baseball. And then I was able to I loved building these divisions. And so we got baseball to 15, 20 guys, and then he came in, and then I built a team of other baseball agents to help us grow baseball. And then went and did the same thing with golf. Kind of went down to Georgia. We had Georgia has a wonderful golf program, and Coach Hack took me in and helped me understand golf and recruit golfers and signed some guys that year. And then, again, same thing. I was sort of in that environment and meeting other players when I was on the range at tour events, et cetera. And then got golf to a critical point, and then brought in another agent and sort of did that at scale with broadcasting. My college coaches, my NBA coaches would get fired, and their wives would call and go, get them a job. Get them out of here. And so that was literally how I started a broadcaster division. Chris Rivers, Doc Rivers' wife, called and said, when he had gotten fired, and said, you got to get him a job. He's driving us all insane. He won't stop. And so literally I called NBC, and we got him a gig, but then broadcast, same thing, and then hired a critical mass. So I got into it really by, just putting yourself out there, getting in front of the kind of people that you want to work with, networking, connecting, asking questions, being curious, and then, getting great people around us to help us serve our players. And, to me, that's what's so special about it is it's not at all, it's not me, it's the opportunity to pour into these young people who have 4 years, 5 years, maybe 10 at the most, right, to make a unique amount of money in a really unique window of time, and have a platform that they can utilize to do a lot of special things in their life if they do it right. And, to me, I took that really seriously. I mean, it wasn't about anything other than how do you maximize this window of time for this young person? How do you make sure they take advantage of it on and off the field or the court or the course? And protect their family along the way. Tell them the truth. They don't have a lot of people in their life that tell them the truth. And do it with love and all those things. And at the end, I had about 300 guys after about 18 years, guys and gals, some female broadcasters and LPGA players as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And kind of building on that notion, you talked to the students a little bit about it, and you just alluded to it here, but the relationships you form with your clients. Yeah. So to the extent that, you can share or you're comfortable sharing, what was maybe one of the most memorable relationships you had with or one of the most meaningful you've had with a client?
Wow. I mean, there's been so many. I mean, honestly, John Smoltz is a first-class guy. And, John and I have had so much fun together playing golf. He was at my wedding. He was knocking on the door of the hospital after I delivered my first child, and my mom said, John, you need to leave. And I go, Mom, he's a big league baseball player. Like, he makes like, you need it. No, don't tell him to leave. She goes, well, you just had a baby. He needs to get out of here. So, Smoltzy, what's fun is 90% of the things that I talked to my guys about was them as human beings. The stuff, and what I always loved about John was, he had so much going on in his life off the field. Kids, wife, ex-wife. And then I would watch him step out on the mound and throw 80 pitches, sit guys down, Hall of Fame, all that. And I was like, wow. I mean, his capacity to manage pressure and perform was uncanny. And then he used it all for good. He built a Christian school in Atlanta. And, Tom Izzo, wonderful relationship with Tom. I mean, same deal. I mean, just hasn't changed. And we were talking about Tom earlier. I mean, just a wonderful human being. Ernie Johnson Jr. is probably one of my favorite guys. I mean, a moment with EJ when, his son was really disabled and recently Michael died, but we would go have lunch and, he'd come off the set with Barkley and Kenny and these guys, and he's so good at what he does on TNT. And we'd get in his minivan and drive to lunch with Michael, and all Michael ever wanted you to do was rub his head. And we'd sit at lunch with Michael, and EJ would feed him. And, I was like, wow, if the world knew, after you're being flanked by Barkley and Kenny, and you do that, and then you come, I mean, he's just an amazing. So the guys and gals that, didn't change when they made $100 million, couple $100 million, they didn't change. They stayed the same. And I know many of us are Midwesterners, and it's a value that I know we all hold dear, right, is that those core values and staying rooted in that. And so the guys and gals that stayed that way are the ones that I'm super connected with and still. And then the moments where they're just so funny. I mean, they're goofballs, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, Smoltzy calls me up one day and he says, you're not going to believe what I did yesterday. And I go, what's up? And he goes, I got to Chicago to play the Cubs. He said, I walked in, I hand the bellman $100. I told him, I got the bags. Because normally the guys pull up on a bus, they get out, everybody else pulls their bags, takes them up to the room. John paid the bellman to go up, took all the keys to all the big league guys' rooms, 24 rooms. He stalled the players off the bus. They short-sheeted the beds, put Vaseline on the toilet seat, took all the towels out of the room, tuned the heat up to 100 in every room, and left. And John, thinks that's the funniest thing ever. So it's the stuff like that where I'm playing golf with a couple guys once, and he looks at him and goes, dude, I'll pay you $50 if you can go hold the duck's beak shut for 5 seconds. And it's a rookie baseball player, so he's like, $50, man, I'm in. And we let 4 groups play through while he kept trying to get this $50, So it's just that stuff that you just can't, it's so funny. They're fun. They're a blast.
You can make a whole podcast on those stories.
But the truth is the best, the moments really, and I know that some of the older people in the room can connect to this. It's never the deal that's on ESPN on the ticker that's the highest rated. It's the guy that I needed to get 11 more days in the big leagues to earn his pension for the rest of his life. And we got the Marlins to give him 11 big league days so that he could get his pension. And see the look in Dee's eyes, his wife, when we just got those 11 more days, because, those are the cool ones. It wasn't ever about the money. It was always about the fact that you could impact their family a little bit better and a little bit differently.
Certainly, and that's obviously really impactful for them, and then as you alluded to, for you. So
sure.
Kind of making this pivot now to game changers, being an author, and consulting all these businesses and sort of sharing your wisdom. What was the moment for you where you decided that it was time to move from representation to the Game Changers podcast and
Sure.
helping out other people and spreading that mission?
Yeah. Well, I wrote a book, and the book did pretty well, and then I wrote another one, and then that one, and companies started saying, hey, will you come and talk about performance? Will you come and talk about the stuff in your book? You write a book and people think you know something. and right or wrong. And so I did, and I started speaking, and it was connecting. It was helping people. It was as a wife and a mother who'd played sports, been in sports, and it was resonating. And I thought, boy, this feels really good to feel like you're helping people. And gosh, you can go to your grave and negotiate $1 billion or $2 billion, but who cares? I mean, what if you can help more people? And then I found myself really at a point where I remember I landed once in like Pittsburgh, and a couple of my players called, and they didn't know what my voicemail sounded like because they never went to voicemail much. And so I landed because I was on an airplane, and I was going to give a keynote at an event, and that was when I thought, boy, I can't do both of these things well. I'm going to need to and I had 3 kids in 12 months. That's another story. So we had one, and then 12 months later I had twins, all 3 girls. Now they're 18, and 19. But nonetheless, my phone rang all the time. And I remember just thinking, wow, how is this going to work? I'm the only one that can be their mom. And what will this look like if I'm working 24/7? Will I miss all of this? And while simultaneously the speaking was super fun, and and then we launched the podcast, and now we do training, and it's sort of evolved from there. But I think Arthur Blank told me, you follow your heart and you close a gap in the market, and maybe it'll turn out right. And that's really what I tried to do. I just tried to follow my heart and close a gap, and it's worked.
Yeah, certainly. And something that I wanted to ask you about that I think is kind of interesting is this idea of, you talk about being fearless, you talk about, sort of always being driven. And I know that some of this comes from the athletes you worked with who inspired you for that. So, for example, the story you told about John Smoltz. So how does maybe some of your past clients shape some of the work you still do presently with the Game Changers podcast?
Well, the podcast is so fun. I mean, we really try to go out and try to find people that we believe are different, are game changers, are unique in their view and their approach, and are also, great people too. I think what I found it was that the way that a great athlete, a great coach, a hockey player, a great baseball player, the way they behave, the best of the Bradys, the LeBrons, the Serenas, they're the same. They deal with change, adversity, opportunity. They adapt. They're fearless. They step into change. They're all very similar. And I find that too on my podcast, right? Whether it's Matthew McConaughey or Ernie Johnson or they're all very similar in their intense curiosity, their mindset. And so I had an opportunity to see that front and center as an agent. And now to be able to talk to some of these folks and share those conversations with the world in a way that hopefully they can lift up and apply to their lives is so powerful, because the conversations I had with my athletes were one-on-one, right? There wasn't a microphone. It wasn't going to be reproduced. But it's so much similar to the conversations that I have now with the people that I feel so fortunate to be able to interview, they're just peak performers. Their mindset, their curiosity, their drive, their insatiable grit is so fun to unlock, and then hopefully it's stuff that people can just pick up and apply.
Absolutely. No, I listened to a couple episodes, and it definitely got me fired up.
Good.
So yes,
That's
definitely
awesome.
a lot of good messages there. Being a sports management professor, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a question about the industry. And I should have said too, we're going to leave a little bit of time at the end for the audience to ask some questions for Molly. So question about sports, a little bit of rapid fire, and then we'll get to that Q&A that is open to the audience. So the one question I wanted to ask you about the sport industry is, how would you assess, being obviously the trailblazing agent that you were, how would you assess the current landscape of the sport industry as it regards to gender equity? Where do we need to improve? Where does the conversation need to shift? What are your thoughts on that?
At the college level or the professional level?
Both.
Great. I mean, we've got a long way to go. We got a long way to go for women, for sure, and of just diversity and inclusion in general across the board. women, the comp for women continues to be a gap at the professional level. We're seeing, Carly Lloyd was on my podcast actually, and, she's been one that's really spearheaded some of these issues with women's soccer. It's TV rights, it's sponsorships. I mean, that's where the money's coming from, and that's where the gap is, because it's hard to close that without the funds coming in on the backside. But there's a gap, and I think, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and I think Wasserman is trying to put a group together that's trying to help do that. At the college level, I was fortunate when I was at Michigan State. That was when Title IX really got pushed down. I was at State from '89 to '93, and so I was a student athlete representative at State on that committee. Again, I think we're moving in the right direction, but I'm not very patient, and so it's not as fast as you always want it to be. And because sports is, as we know here at Carthage, is such a powerful thing. It's a game changer in the way that we navigate our lives, both for women and for men. So I hope that we can get there a little bit quicker. Both professionally and at the amateur level. It's fun to see women at the college level with NIL getting some comp, which is pretty cool to see. That's sort of nice. You're seeing some of that. There's a UCLA soccer player that's getting some nice pops at the college level. So we're seeing some revenue flow in for them there, but there's still a gap.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely more work that needs to be done. So, but are you ready for your rapid fire?
I'm ready.
Questions?
You know why he's doing this? Because my podcast, I do this with my guests. So just for the people that don't know why he's doing rapid fire.
Yes, a lot of same questions too. So I hope I'm flipping the script on you a little bit.
There we go. I'm ready, man. I'm ready.
All right. What is the worst piece of advice you have ever received?
You can't do it. You're a woman. Don't be a sports agent.
Yeah, that's a pretty bad one. They were a little off on that one. What is the best piece of advice you would give to students and other young professionals in the audience?
Yeah, when you ask for advice, you get a job, and when you ask for a job, you get advice. I mean, just keep asking people for advice. People love to sit down and give 20 minutes and just talk about, just feed them, feed them and ask them great questions. But adults love to talk and support young people. Just keep asking for advice, and you'd be amazed the number of people that will say yes to a 20-minute meeting. And all you want to do in that meeting is get them to like or respect you enough to help you or hire you down the road. And if you can do that, you'll keep going.
So aside from your books, what is the best book you've ever read?
Oh my gosh. The Alchemist is a really cool book. I don't know if anybody's read that book. It's a really cool book about purpose and drive, and I really enjoy that. Another book that Jim Lair has been and continues to be a wonderful mentor of mine. He's a sports psychologist, mental coach for some of the best tennis players in the world, and he wrote a book called The Power of Full Engagement. I love that one. I think that's a really, really powerful book because I lived in a world where I wrote a book called The Energy Clock, because I think we live in a world as business people where we manage our time versus our energy. But what you see great athletes do is manage their energy more than their time. And Jim really was one of the first people to really pioneer that thinking around managing energy over time. And so that book's a good one too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I need to read that.
It's awesome. It's a great one by Jim Lair.
What is the most important part of your daily routine?
Getting up early before the rest of the world in my house. I get up pretty early in the morning and try to have some time and some coffee and get my head squared away, have a little time, and get locked in on the day and the people and my family, all of those things. Think about, spend time, taking about an hour or so before the rest of the world starts coming at me.
Yeah, that's a good one. And then what is a new habit that you have picked up that has really helped you?
A new habit. You are hitting me with all my stuff, man. You're killing me. A new habit, and this is funny. I interviewed Brad Stevens from the Celtics, and he threw me off on this one because I said, "What's a new habit, Brad?" And you know what? He goes, "Walking." And I was like, Brad Stevens, a new habit, walking? That is not what I expected. But, that is actually, I love to be outside, and walking more and being outside more has been something that I've tried to make sure that I take the time to do. I'll do calls when I'm walking now. I'll get outside and walk and do calls outside, and that's a big deal. I think it just keeps you squared away, keeps you fresh.
All right, only 2 more, I promise.
Dude, endless. Let's go.
What do people get wrong about you?
What do people get wrong about me? You know, that I am pretty sensitive, emotional. I am like I'm very, very into I don't know that this is get wrong or get right, but I am very into my family. I'm very into my children. I have 3 girls who, I talk to. They're all at Auburn now, but I talk to them all 2 to 3 times a day. And my husband and I have been married for 22 years, and he's my rock. And I think probably people think, oh, it's, tough, whatever. I am very, very, my main roles in my life are wife and mother, for sure. And all this other stuff it's fun to be able to give back to, but I'm a softie. It's probably what they get wrong about me.
And then last, you kind of talked about early influencers in your life, but who is a current game changer, someone very contemporary that inspires you, and why?
Boy, honestly, I would say my team, and I have a small team, but I have a woman that's been with me for 12 years, Sprague Painter, and she's just she inspires me because she's very, very smart, and she's kind of my wing woman, my business partner on our training company that we do, and she is behind the scenes, but she's my business rock, and she inspires me because of her capacity, her ability to take in an enormous amount of information and push it back out and execute is uncanny. I feel really, really fortunate to have her. She worked for the Falcons for a long time. She worked for the Atlanta Dream, and she's been with me really since the beginning of when I sort of left the agent business and started over here. So she's a pretty important piece of my world now.
That's awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that. I know, like I said, it's Q&A time, so I don't know if we have, yes, we do have a system going here.
I'll go behind. I can repeat it. Yeah, go for it, man. Outside voice.
All right. I'm involved in the video game and esports industry. So how have you seen gaming and esports now encroaching into the traditional sports world?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot less about that than you do. I can promise you that. And obviously this has come in since I really stepped away from the agent business now. I can imagine it's going to change it from, I don't know how athletes are getting paid to have their name and representation inside of, you know more about that than I do. I would imagine it'll change things. I think though there's still that human dynamic that probably is real. The metaverse and all that, is that what you're alluding to?
Well, more of a crossover, if you will.
Okay.
Like now we see more traditional sports starting to embrace the gaming side, and we see
Yep.
the players themselves starting, especially during the pandemic, you saw a lot of players who were
Yep.
out playing more video games and being online more. I mean, as an agent, you must feel weird about social media now compared to when you were being an agent and having to deal with all the
Yeah.
stories, I guess, versus now where a sports person can just put anything out there to the world for everybody to see.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, athletes really have their own networks now, right? I mean, it literally in their hands all the time. I mean, I think that it's all part of the process. It's going to change the dynamic of sports probably forever. I certainly changes the name and likeness for athletes. I'm not really that fit to answer that question, is the truth. I'm dancing, have you noticed? It's going to change things, but it's like I was talking to the students earlier, when social media came into play when I was an agent. I mean, that was a major curveball because all my athletes were like, what is this? I mean, Twitter? Because that was when it was just Twitter, and my guys had no idea what to do with it, and they were pushing away from it. And I don't know if it'll be similar with esports, right, where the athletes push away, but then they come in, and obviously pretty much most athletes are on social media. Most coaches at the college level hate it, because it's dangerous often. But I would imagine they'd be a resistance, and then they'll pull it in. Yes.
Money. You had the young athletes just coming out of college.
Yes.
How did you convince them it was more than just the money?
Sure. So the question was, when you had the young athletes coming out of college, how did you convince them that it was more than the money? When I was trying to get like a baseball player to sign or to go. You know, the good news is they got to where they were because they love to play. They love the game. And you've got to help remind them that that's why they're there, and that's what's going to keep them there. Money will jam them up really fast if they don't navigate it well and right. And I was always a proponent, if it was a kid out of high school who wasn't a first-round guy, I generally wanted him to go to college because, you know, that is 50% of first-round guys make it. So you want to help them understand that I know this looks like a lot of money, but after 4 or 5 years, which is what it's going to take you to get to the big leagues, and after taxes, it's not that much. You know what I mean? So I was a big proponent of them playing the long game and not just looking at the short-term inflow, if you will. But you've got to help them recognize what got them there is the love of the game, the love of the grind, the love of the grit, right? The love of the practice and the long days and the late nights, and that's how they got there. And they've got to keep that threaded in them if they're going to stay there. And, you know, they're athletes at the core, and you want to keep them in that athlete mindset. Keep them young, keep them all that stuff.
Molly, I want to add to that too, because you and I have talked a couple times this morning already about name, image, likeness, and how it's going to shift the college athletics landscape a little bit. So I think it's cool to have you here to have sort of this agent's take as to how might, especially, you know, you and I were referring to it as the wild, wild west right now. How do you protect these student athletes with everything that's very fastly progressing?
Yeah, I mean, you guys are certainly even, you know, here on a college campus closer to it than I am. But, you know, I mean, it's changing college sports for sure forever. There's no doubt about that. It's a minor league system now for, you know, the big leagues, if you will. You know, I hope at the NCAA level and at the college level, they're helping to prepare kids and young people for what that looks like. Because they need some structure around that. They need to recognize the breadth of the influence potentially that brings them when they are getting paid by a brand for whatever reason. And what an opportunity to leverage it appropriately, to lean into it, to learn how to utilize this as a platform for them to understand business. It's just like everything in life. Everything's coming at young people faster than it did for us. But it's long overdue, I think, and there's a lot of good. Jay Billis wrote a great article about a lot of the positives that are coming from the NIL, and it really opened my eyes a little bit to some of the positives. But I think it's in part the agents that are bringing the deals to the young people. They're playing a role in it. The universities and the NCAA are playing a role in it, and I just want to make sure that at the end of the day, they're protecting the young athlete. Mentally, physically, emotionally, all that with what comes with this, with the money and the change in the platform that's occurring. I mean, you know, these SEC quarterbacks. I don't know what's the Alabama quarterback getting. I mean, he might be making more than Saban at 18, 19, 20 years old. You know, I hope people are around him to protect him.
Good, thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
So what is the biggest challenge you've overcome during the duration of your career?
Wow, what's the biggest challenge I've overcome over the duration of my career? You know, I would say, I mean, that's such a good question. You know, the contract negotiations, those are daily, right, at some level. Probably the biggest one is being a woman and sort of the moments in which maybe, you know, I went to go see one of my PGA Tour players, and we were going to walk in to have lunch in the in the restaurant, and they just had a men's grill, so they set a table up outside the kitchen for us. And there was stuff like that happened. But I think, and we talked about this earlier, I mean, that's where you got to have a bit of a mindset shift and say, well, maybe this is good. Maybe this is good that I'm different. Maybe this will actually help me be able to pour into these athletes and their families in a way that's different from the male agents that I competed against. So, like everything, right? We get bump up against an obstacle. I think we've got to change the story that we tell ourselves in that moment to be one that's good. And there was moments behind dugouts, on ranges, when that golfer that I recommended, that happened from time to time, particularly earlier in my career. But again, it was about having a good enough relationship with my athletes that they had my back, right? It wasn't like that golfer went, well, let's go somewhere else. No, he posted up the general manager at the club and said, dude, I'm here with my agent from Atlanta. Like, you need to set something up. So it was having good relationships with my players, so they protected me and had my back too. But those were big ones. And then I would say other challenges would be athletes I went after and recruited that I didn't get. Negotiating Billy Donovan's contract for the Magic for $30 million, and then he decided he didn't want to go to the Magic, and we had to unwind it. That was tough. So there was moments, like that. And then, of course, the time when I sort of pulled back and said, wow, I think I'm going to step away from this space and go do something that I think is even actually more where I need to be and where I really want to go. Anytime we're making career changes in our lives, particularly when you're in a job that everybody thinks is, how could you ever walk away from that? Those were big, those kind of big decisions. And then I would say, how much time do you have for the challenges? No, and then the other thing I would say is, three kids in 12 months with 300 athletes and a team of agents, that was a juggling act and a fire drill. But we made it. We can do hard things, I always believe, and so we did, and now it's great. So good. Yes.
Yes.
You mentioned about gender equity, and particularly as it pertains to women's professional sports. What comes first? I mean, how do we pay the women tennis players, the women hockey players, the women's basketball players? They all want more money, and they should. They're working as hard as the men are. Mm-hmm. The issue is that the revenue they're generating is so significantly less that you can't pay them what you're paying a male because you'll go out of business. Mm-hmm. So what is what's your thought process of how do we get to the point that we can start paying the women in the sports industry at least getting closer to par to what we're paying the men?
Yeah. So, you got to know who your audience is, and this is an owner that's talking.
Yeah, I'm an owner.
I don't know that I have the answer, Craig. I mean, I think that it starts with sponsorship money and TV rights, I think, is where it would start. And so then you have to pull back and say, well, how do we get there? How do we get better TV deals? How do we get more visibility so that the TV networks can sell the ads that can help fund the inflows? So then how do we get TV networks to want to air these women's sports more so that they can sell the ads? I think it starts there, is my gut. Now, you took the mic. He wants the mic back. I mean, it.
We also have to get people watching women.
Absolutely. Yeah. He said you've got to get women. You've got to get people watching women's sports. I couldn't agree with you more. And so then you say, well, how do we do that, right? How do we do that? And I think you're right. I mean, I think we're unpacking that. That's where it starts, though. And it's probably the next generation of young people that want to watch. I mean, I personally like watching some women's sports more than men. And then we've got the gap where some, there isn't a comparable to men's football. I mean, so you have some gaps there. But, what comes up for you? I mean, as an owner of a team, when you think about how to close the gap, isn't it TV?
It typically is TV, but again, what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Right.
For us, we're looking at, there are two professional women's hockey leagues.
Yep.
And we're very interested in acquiring a team and putting it in our market. But we're already we're fearful that we're going to be receiving a lot of negative press because the pay is so much less for the women.
Yeah.
Is that something that we want to tarnish our brand with
Yeah.
in the Minnesota Wild?
Right.
And so it's a hard decision that you have to make. I don't know what the answer is, and I guess I kind of put it on the table just to
Yeah.
create dialogue. I
Sure.
don't know how we get it going, but we have to start somewhere. And I think it really is about, we have to sell the women's
Yeah.
sports to the consumers.
Yeah, no, I think that's the biggest gap to me. I mean, a really good friend of mine in Atlanta owned the Atlanta women's basketball team, the Dream. And I mean, I got inside of the numbers of that team, and I mean, they're real. It's not, there's no hiding, I mean, going on. And I mean, she was losing money. And, and these girls were playing basketball for $80,000 a year or whatever it was, going over to Europe to play for whatever. So, it's the TV and the sponsorship is the gap, and how do we get it? Because, and to your point, I mean, I love watching women's basketball, but you walk into these stadiums and there's not enough fans in there, so they're not making money. They're not putting butts in the seats, and if you're not putting butts in the seats, you can't sell the sponsorships. So, it's tough.
Molly, that was fun. Thank you very much. Thank you, Molly.
Thanks
This was
so
really
much,
fun
you guys.
conversation.
Thank you.
And for all the students in here, there's another student-focused session in the CSU at 3 o'clock. So please, I encourage you to go there and ask more great questions like the ones we had today. So thank you very much. Thank you, Molly.
Thanks, everybody.